Sources said that Kalani Sitake had emerged as Penn State's top candidate. And then BYU and a cookie company started to fight back.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That is right. It is a Locked On crossover to talk this Penn State coaching search. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. He is Brian Smith, the host of The Portal. He is our recruiting expert, college football expert in general here on the Locked On Podcast Network, which is the #1 sports podcasting network out there. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Brian, this Penn State coaching search is crazy. It's bizarre. How did we get to this point? We'll talk about that later. What Penn State's backup options are. Why aren't they going after Brian Hartline? Okay, he should be the lead candidate here. But sources on 3, 24/7, everybody else began to report that Kalani Sitake of BYU had emerged as Penn State's leading candidate. Okay, so this one was kept under wraps. I'll give Penn State and Pat Kraft credit for it, that nobody saw this coming. And this has been in the works for quite some time, it seems. And then BYU caught word of it. The Church of Latter-day Saints and Crumbl, a cookie company, the CEO is connected to BYU and helps support BYU athletics. So that's where we are. Sitake is between Penn State and BYU. We'll see how it all unfolds. But Brian, this has just been absolutely insane.
I think this is college football on a yearly basis now. It just happens to be Penn State's turn to get caught in the twister. Like, they jumped out pretty early with the James Franklin firing, but the opportunities quickly dwindled for whatever reason. Everybody's got their own speculation. And now they're the one that's standing and there's no chair left, is what it kind of seems like. So Sitake, maybe Jeff Brohm, maybe somebody else, but I did not expect to be having this podcast with you at this juncture.
No, and we just had a conversation, right? This is a follow-up to the previous conversation we had where I sat back and I said, Sitake is a great coach, but he's not a great fit for Penn State. But this is one that, Penn State and Pat Kraft, they seemed all in on. Again, kept it under wraps, that they're trying to work out, okay, how can we best accommodate Sitake? How can we get, the recruiting class? So I see the vision of it. If you're going to get Sitake, if you're going to get some, Ryder Lyons, a 5-star quarterback, right? Is that part of the deal that you're going to bring over that class of 2026? But then again, BYU caught wind of it. And the initial reports were, well, BYU is not going to be able to match it. So Penn State, you got your coach. But then it got past BYU and it got to the boosters, the Church of Latter-day Saints. And so now it's not just Penn State versus BYU in a contract battle. It's now Penn State versus BYU, Crumbl Cookies, other mega investors into BYU athletics, and the Church of Latter-day Saints.
It is a very unique love triangle there, isn't it? I mean, it's bizarre, but boosters run companies. So Crumbl Cookie, executives, I get that part. That's just ironic that it's a cookie company. It's a nice little sidebar there, but that church has a lot of money. My question for this entire group of people listening to this or watching this, whenever you do, does BYU have the stomach to go back and forth to pay for a coach like this in a public fashion? That's a very conservative institution. I'm sure some of the people there probably don't like this, but again, if it only takes 1 or 2 mega boosters, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But at some point, I wonder when they're going to have enough of it. That would be my question, because Penn State needs a coach. They're probably going to have to overpay at this point because they're the last one standing. So I'm curious to see how far this goes and what the number would be, because BYU's private. They don't have to announce, but if he ends up at Penn State, that would give you an idea what BYU went to. That would be interesting.
The rumors say that the contract offer is north of $10 million from Penn State, just to kind of give people perspective. I mean, this is a hefty sum of money that we're talking about here. So this isn't Penn State is all in trying to make this happen. Like, this is truly, again, that's why on 3, 24/7, everybody else said Penn State Sitake has emerged as Penn State's top candidate. So Brian, let's twofold. One, does this actually happen? Does Sitake end up at Penn State? Because it seemed like things were trending that way, and now everything's cooled down and it's dialed back, but it's still kind of a toss-up in people's mind that he could still end up at Penn State, or that BYU did enough to bring him back and retain him, because they've showed the support. Sitake is an alum. Okay, he bleeds BYU. He is BYU through and through. I've said that on every single conversation that I've had to this point. So, and that's why I said also in our previous episode, I need to see it actually happen before I can believe it. So I don't see how he leaves BYU now that he has support, at least comparable support to what Penn State was offering him.
I don't know if it's just money. I wonder if it's the opportunity with the resources, how recruiting works. Like getting kids into BYU is hard. Their culture is difficult. Like they literally don't want players to cuss, etc. Like it's hard to get elite players to go there.
But he's also not an outsider of a coach. Like that's part of his.
Oh, I know.
He is invested in that. Like that's his.
Oh,
those are all of his tenets. It's not like he's an outsider that's at BYU. No, he has all of those same morals and standards, if you will.
I agree, but he knows that most people do not. When they're recruit 17-year-olds, how many 17-year-olds do you know that play big time football that don't cuss?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like all like you can look into it yourself. Like BYU is very stringent. Doesn't always fit. And I know that he understands it makes recruiting much more difficult. So Penn State's a state university. It's a lot easier to get kids into school and they don't have the same religious affiliation. So it's an easier place to win. There's no nice way to say it. It's just way easier. So that's one of the reasons it's amazing what Kalani Sitake has done at BYU. Like they lost their quarterback right before the season. They got a freshman. They go 11-1. The guy can coach. The guy can flat out coach because they're not a great team, in my opinion. And I think they'll get bombed by Texas Tech. But just to get to that point, like he should be a national coach of the year candidate. Legitimately. Like he is very, very good.
He is truly doing more with less. Although BYU is starting to catch up again. Their recruiting class is very respectable. Again, that's the appeal for Penn State, is that you get him on board. You're able to bring Ryder Lyons, some other players along. I imagine they're also committed to BYU for other purposes, right? More than just football. So that is going to be tough. But that's kind of the question here. So let's wrap up this segment before we talk about Jeff Brohm, Brian Hartline. Who would Penn State go after if it's not Sitake? Would Sitake even work out? Because I think he's a great coach. I think he can do more with less. So if you give him the Penn State war chest, they'll be able to elevate him, right? But he's never recruited outside of that part of the country. He is, we want to talk about, oh, well, he's BYU through and through. He is Utah through and through. Just about everybody on that roster is from the state of Utah. Just about everybody on that roster is from in that class of 2026 is from Utah. You have some players, some select players. So would he be able to recruit in the East Coast? That's the big concern. And then how quickly, okay, he is an outsider. He is not a Penn State alum. So how quickly are fans going to turn on Sitake if it's 8-4, 8-4, 9-3? Again, same results. And that's kind of what I'm projecting here, is somebody that you're doing it for the resources. You're not, are you doing it because you really want to be at Penn State? Or are you doing it because you're getting such a massive investment from the university and then you have no affiliation to Penn State? So I'm just wondering, are you going to get the results quickly enough to appease the fans?
That's a great question. But again, I think he knows that regardless of the resources at BYU, the restrictions in recruiting make that a very difficult task. Mm-hmm. If he takes the right staff, he's probably, everybody thinks they can fix something. You know, the crazy boyfriend, the girlfriend goes back to, I can fix him. That's, coaches are that way with players that have problems, etc. He probably thinks he can be the magic elixir that gets Penn State over the top. That's a very common thing. It's human nature.
That's the pitch.
Yeah. But at the same time, the guy's also won at BYU. Yeah. It's kind of hard to argue with him that he can figure things out. The one way I think it could work, beyond, you got to have a quarterback, leave that to the side. If they keep most of the staff and he just brings a handful of his guys from BYU, and I think that's a big question. That might be why it's like some of the guys he wants to bring may not want to go. Mm-hmm. And that could be a stopping point for Sitake himself. But to that end, if you mix the two staffs, and I have no idea which ones it would be, that'd be up for Sitake and his staff to figure out. Maybe that would be the right elixir long term. But like we've talked about already here recently on this pod, Penn State's 2026 class is abysmal because everybody left it pretty much. It's not
because they don't know who the coach is.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
Yeah.
In a few years, they're going to have to figure that out. How would he handle big time recruiting? Can he handle 5 stars? Can he handle the opportunities to go up against guys like Ohio State and Notre Dame and now Virginia Tech, who's allegedly got NIL money for James Frank? I need to see that too, by the way. I need to see that play out. Florida's going to go all in. Tennessee, Georgia. He's recruiting against all these teams for kids in areas that he's not familiar. Mm-hmm. He's going to need a lot of the current staff at Penn State to make that work. And that's plausible. I'd be fascinated to see how the staff would work out at Penn State if Kalani Sitake did take that job in Happy Valley, because without a bunch of them, this is not going to work recruiting wise.
The vision is that you can have the best of what Sitake has done at BYU, merge it with the best that Penn State has to offer. And that's the vision that Pat Kraft has if it gets across the finish line. But if it does not, where do they go next? Well, Jeff Brohm seems to be the backup plan here, allegedly. Brent Key is still in and out of the mix from Georgia Tech. Why is Brian Hartline not getting the due consideration? We're going to discuss that next here on this Locked On Crossover.
Today's show is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. The holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending someone something memorable to family, to friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to the door. And this week is the best time to jump in because Cyber Sale is here and the deals are huge. Take an example like this. You can get your steaks, you can get your burgers, just like you always do, but you could get side items, you could get desserts, again, delivered to your door, or you could just get full comfort meals also sent right to your home or for a gift. Save big on the unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select items during the Cyber Sale. And for an additional $35 off, use promo code use promo code college at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code college, terms apply. See site for details.
Brian, there's still other candidates out there that I think are not only better fits for Penn State, but I think elevate them too as well. My concern is that Sitake is a great coach, but I don't know that he necessarily elevates them because of those other concerns. Again, how well does he fit? Again, he's not a Penn State guy. But same thing can be said for anybody else we're going to discuss here. Jeff Brohm, Brent Key, Brian Hartline, they're all affiliated with their respective alma maters. Hartline would have to leave Ohio State. Key would have to leave Georgia Tech. Brohm would have to leave Louisville. That's all their alma maters. That's where they went to school. They have a diehard commitment to their universities, supposedly. I also do find that interesting that Sitake would consider leaving his life behind. Like, that's his home. BYU is his home for Penn State. So I think that is really interesting in this conversation that should at least be noted here. What direction does Penn State need to go in? Because I default back to, why hasn't Brian Hartline been given that consideration? He should be the top candidate at this point, especially at this point, and he's not.
My guess is they don't want a guy without experience, and or they want somebody where they can, if they give somebody the head coaching job that doesn't have experience, he would have restraints, like a certain general manager, this and that. Mm-hmm. Guy like Hartline, who's a former NFL player, arguably the best receiver coach in the country at his alma mater, either he's going to do it his way or he's just going to stay in Columbus. Mm-hmm. This is, a lot of these come down to a war of words and language and contracts on how it works. That may be a non-starter for him because he probably wants autonomy. He doesn't have any head coaching experience. I wonder if that's part of it too. Very possible.
Okay, no, I understand that. But Will Stein, Brian Hartline, we just saw Will Stein get hired by Kentucky, but those guys, from my perspective, should be more appealing than what they've been in this Penn State coaching search. I mean, Did it not work with Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame? Did it not work with Dan Lanning in Oregon? Did it not work with Kirby Smart in Georgia? Did it not work with Ryan Day in Ohio State? Those guys aren't the standard. They're the exception. But if what Penn State is trying to do is elevate the program, you have to take a risk. You have to take a gamble on some. Oregon, for the better part of a decade, became somewhat of an afterthought. They were cycling through coaches. They couldn't figure it out. And then they said, you know what? This coordinator seems kind of feisty. Let's give him a chance to actually elevate us into that elite tier. And it worked with Dan Lanning. So that's kind of the formula here. You see Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Oregon and Georgia all at the top presently. What did they do? They hired a coordinator, first-time head coach.
It's ironic that you mentioned those four. On my other podcast, the Portal podcast, I literally said that the four best programs in the country right now are Oregon, Notre Dame, Georgia, and Ohio State's at the top. They all took somewhat calculated risks, but they were guys that had worked at multiple places under really good coaches. Right, like him or not, and he has some valuable points as a person out. Ryan Day can coach.
Yes.
And you're talking about an NFL guy. He's played at Ohio State. Now he's the receiver coach there. I get why you would take a risk on him, but nobody else has hired him either. I wonder if he's just really, really picky about how all the conditions are, because all the things you said, you would think would make more people look at the opportunity to take coordinators. But so far this cycle, to Will Stein, ironically, the Oregon OC, who's had some success, there really haven't been many. Buster Faulkner is a guy I like, number one on my coordinator board in general at Georgia Tech. It's not easy to win at Georgia Tech. He's still available. Why? I mean, if I was Penn State, I would be happy with Buster Faulkner, but that's just me. He can run a passing offense, a running offense, or a combination. He's proven it. And he's also coached at Georgia under this guy. What's his name? Kirby Smart.
Never heard of him.
Yeah. So I don't know what the deal is with the whole situation with Hartline or any other coordinator. You got to be careful for what you ask, though, because if it ends up with Brohm and they get lucky and they get him, great, but that doesn't mean you did the process properly. He's another guy that he's an alum at that school.
Yeah.
You're going to have to completely overpay to get him. And the number of years and all that it's probably not what Penn State needs, but he is a great coach. So if they don't get Kalani Sitake and they don't want Hartline, Zach, you're an alum. At least you have the affiliation. Put your name in, brother. I mean, what do you got to lose?
Well, apparently it doesn't work out that way because Terry Smith is way more qualified than I am.
Touche.
And he's not getting any consideration at this point. And he's an alum, and he played for the football team, and he will absolutely, and he was good, and he will go to war to get Penn State in a better position. And that's, look, an appreciation for the university shouldn't be overlooked. I think that is valuable in these coaching searches, which is why Brent Key and Georgia Tech work out so well. Look at Jeff Brohm and Louisville. It's working out in the process. There is value in being an alum coaching at your alma mater. Kalani Sitake, right? This is why we're having this conversation, because it's so complicated. For Penn State to be viewed as just a job is going to complicate things at the end of the day. But Terry Smith should still get some consideration, or should get more consideration than what he's getting. If Penn State goes with Jeff Brohm, I've said it before in these initial conversations, I like Jeff Brohm a ton because he's shown that he can win the big games. Let's simplify this. Really, he's a good coach. He blue collar type, so he'll fit in pretty well in Central Pennsylvania. But to go 3-1 against top 5 teams at Purdue, when he was at Purdue, and then he upsets Miami of Florida this time around. Like, it's not just one lucky win. Brian, Jeff Brohm has a more recent win over Ohio State than Penn State does. Hire the guy.
I mean, if he would leave, I'm sure they would take him.
But he's the backup. He's the backup plan.
Well, that tells me they don't have a shot at him or they'd have hired him already. I think Florida kicked that tire. I think a few other schools, Auburn and some others. I don't think he really wants to leave. But I don't know what kind of money was offered or what kind of stipulations were given to him. But again, all that stuff matters. But he might just be in a circumstance where I don't know where his daughter is or, whatever. There's all kinds of things that can go into this. But if he's your backup plan, and that's pretty unlikely, who's the backup plan? Because I don't see that happening. Like, I hope, for Penn State, they need to figure that out. But if they don't get Kalani Sitake or Jeff Brohm, who on God's green earth? I mean, Terry Smith's going to be the last man standing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at this point, I'd have no problem with it anyway. That dude is loyal. Holy cow, is he loyal.
You want to talk about loyalty?
That is I don't know if he could be the guy or not. Maybe give him a short deal, 3 years, and you got to prove it. Like if you do a good year one, you extend it, do that a couple, whatever.
Yeah.
It can't be worse than some of the stuff that's going on around college football, though. There's some reaches in some of the coaches. I'll go into that more after signing day on the Portal podcast. But Terry Smith, you could do a lot worse.
Well, that's a perfect segue into our next topic. As this Penn State coaching search has just been bizarre. They were one of the first schools to fire their head coach, and now they're one of the last schools. They're the last major school to pick up a new head coach. So what is going on? Is there other alternate factors that are kind of muddying this coaching search for Penn State? We're going to discuss it. Is this Pat Kraft's fault? All of that and more next on this Locked On Crossover.
Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be a massive event. But let's be honest, getting tickets is not the easiest thing to do with the World Cup. That's why Gametime is a clutch app, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Gametime, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when seats come open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup a realistic instead of impossible option. With the app, you can go in there and search whichever game or games you want. You can click on them. You can look at the seat views right from your phone. You can know exactly where you would be sitting at any event. It's that simple. I just bought 2 tickets on Gametime, and in 5 minutes, including putting in my credit card information, I was in and out. And the best part for a lot of people, again, the price of the tickets. What you see at the beginning is what you're going to get at the end. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Gametime app today.
Well, it seems like Penn State did not have a plan. Maybe they had concepts of a plan, because now we are here, Brian, where Pat Kraft kind of looked like the savior. He was going to lead Penn State to the next level. He went up to the podium, said, this is a national title job. We want to win national titles. Okay, that's great. I also don't think he expected it to go this way. And I imagine he had a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. But then I don't think it got that far. I don't think he had E, F, G, H, I. You get my point. Is that I think at some point he was, well, we're going to get one of these guys, right? We're going to get one of our top candidates. And that never happened. I also don't, I blame Pat Kraft right now to an extent. I'm hesitant because part of me says you're not doing your job well. It shouldn't have gotten to this point because this is Penn State University. But also at the same time, it's because of Penn State University that we are in this situation. And hear me when I say that. The fans did not want James Franklin. At least they booed him in and out of the stadium. Allegedly the donors, the boosters were questioning like, what's going on? Pat Kraft didn't have a choice. That is what I'm trying to say, is that it's not like Kraft went rogue and fired James Franklin and everybody's like, what? Why did you do this? How could this happen? There was so much pressure on him to fire James Franklin that he's now darned if he did or darned if he didn't, because his job was attached to James Franklin. So it was either fire James Franklin or eventually go down with him. And now that might be the case at the end of the day. We're just the long road back to it where Pat Kraft might end up losing his job because of James Franklin.
If you're going to make the move, and a lot of people were happy with him when he did, you still have to have a plan that works out.
Right.
And being an AD is like being a career gambler, literally, because even some of the best coaching hires of the last 20 years, if you go through whoever the hot guy was in any cycle, less than 50% hit. Even the top guy, like this year, it's Kiffin. Is it a lock Kiffin's going to hit at LSU?
Not necessarily.
No. I would vote against it. Why?
Too.
Because the money says that it doesn't happen. It's just freaking hard. To that end, you get into the pride factor. This is where Mr. Kraft is probably at a difficult spot. It's not his fault, but Penn State fans are rabid. And to be, like you said, rightfully so, one of the first to fire the coach, but yet standing when all the chairs are taken, is probably not sitting real well on the text messages around the offices in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Harrisburg and New Jersey, New York. Those Penn State alums probably aren't real happy right now. If they don't end up with somebody that they like, there's going to be a lot of pressure on people even above Mr. Kraft to get rid of it. And he may not want to be there. It could become so unbearable. And that's kind of the life of an AD. You make a lot of money, but you pay for it in other ways.
You're also potentially setting up the next head coach for failure, regardless of who that is. Sitake, or is it Terry Smith, or is it because you not having a head coach in place? Okay, well, now the class of 2026 is a wash. And I said, okay, that's okay. If you can maximize the transfer portal, it's still not great. Like, it's not ideal. I don't want them to not have a class of 2026, but I still want them to have a semblance of a roster and not have to play college football free agency to where every roster spot is somebody brand new, because then it's not going to work. You're setting up the head coach for failure. This was an interesting, I wanted to save this till the end, because this was an interesting, at least observation, if you will. Todd McShay, former draft analyst, he now does his own show, went on Bill Simmons's podcast. So these are pretty well-known podcast hosts or sports media figures right at this point in time. They're legacy guys. McShay does have some vested interest in James Franklin, whether it's for better or for worse, but he really seems to be interested in talking about James Franklin, the Penn State coaching search, and offered a perspective that said, where he basically, to summarize, McShay told Bill Simmons that Penn State and Pat Kraft are not just competing against other schools in this coaching search. They're competing against an allegedly disgruntled Jimmy Sexton and his agency, where they are basically at war right now because they are upset with the fact that Pat Kraft embarrassed, so to speak, James Franklin, didn't give him a contract extension over the summer, then fired him in the middle of the season. And now Jimmy Sexton and his agency are allegedly making it more difficult for Penn State to find a worthwhile head coach. So if this is true, I can see why it hasn't been easy sledding for Pat Kraft.
Leverage is a big part of business and everything that we do on this planet. Jimmy Sexton's the most important person, you could argue, in college football.
Oh yeah, who does he not represent? I feel like that's a simpler question.
Well, he's the guy that was his main confidant, went off, and now he has some of them. He probably owns half of the main guys, but some of them aren't under him, but the number that are incredible.
Yeah.
So that's a problem, but it also, part of it has to be with who you wanted. Couldn't be all of them under Jimmy. I mean, there had to be a few other agents out there that had good coaches. And for whatever reason, Penn State didn't hit on those guys either. So I don't know. But if he has a grudge and they can prove it, maybe they should take him to court. But I don't know if it's worth Penn State's time to do that or not.
It is a bold assessment, to say the least, right? With the
100%.
Implications that it could have, and the impact, like you said, that Sexton has on college football. Again, I can see it though, right? If you want my 2 cents about it, I can understand that, because again, from their perspective, James Franklin took them to the college football semifinal, and he wanted an extension. Pat Kraft allegedly told him to wait. We're going to wait and see. We need you still to prove it. And then he gets fired in the middle of the season. Like that is in a way, from their perspective, pretty disrespectful when you look at it.
Yeah, like
there's more context to it, right? And I've talked about it dozens of times. You've weighed in on it as well, that it's not just, oh, James Franklin led them to a semifinal and then was fired the next day because of it. But I can see how, with all of James Franklin's success, and then Pat Kraft and Penn State relieve him of his job, why Franklin and his agent would be mildly, to put it mildly, disgruntled.
I get it. And Franklin probably, let's be honest, I'm sure he holds a grudge because he's a competitor.
Absolutely. It's the competitive nature of it. I said that right out of the gate. He has an axe to grind so badly.
And he will until he retires. That's just the way that is. But Penn State's the one that enacted it. So as the saying goes, be careful for what one wishes. That's part of it. So, you know what? If I was James, I'd probably be pretty irritated with the Penn State brass myself. So I can't really blame Franklin or anybody else on his staff, whatever. But that's something that's going to be fun to see play out. I'm sure we'll talk about that many times during the spring and summer months when recruiting's going on for the class of 27 with Penn State and Virginia Tech. That war is coming very, very fast. So that'll be fun. But I'll leave it at that. It is a very dicey situation with regards to Franklin and Sexton.
And it could be worse for Penn State if some of those Penn State assistant coaches all follow to Virginia Tech and join up with James Franklin. I'd be terrified if Terry Smith, Anthony Poindexter, Dan Connor, Deion Barnes, for whatever reason, all follow James Franklin in that regard. So just putting it out there. That's going to do it for this edition of a Locked On crossover between Locked On Nittany Lions and The Portal. He is Brian Smith, the host of The Portal, recruiting expert, college football expert here on the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Zach Seyko, your host of Locked On Nittany Lions. For daily Penn State sports coverage and daily coverage around recruiting and all things the transfer portal, subscribe to our respective YouTube channels and wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Let us know your thoughts down in the comment section. And Brian, as always, appreciate your time, your perspective, and can't wait to talk with you again.
Appreciate it. I look forward to it.